This is the last part of this lesson. This is when we are factoring not a quadratic trinomial, but a polynomial that already has 4 terms. So there is nothing new here. The only thing new is we already have the 4 terms and we don't need to use a graphic organizer to create 4 terms. So we're just going to start with the second step of grouping. We're just going to group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. We're going to factor out the GCF and this GCF. We're going to put the 2 GCFs together for one binomial, and the other binomial is the common one. Let's take a look at another example. We have 4 terms. There's no GCF. We're going to factor by grouping. We're going to factor out the GCF of each binomial. We're going to write the GCFs as one binomial. This is one factor, and this is our second factor. Very easy. Let's do one more. There is no GCF. Let's put grouping symbols around the first 2 and the last 2 terms. Let's factor out. So I believe 4x squared can divide into those 2 terms, minus 5 here, we're going to put 4x squared minus 5 is one of our factors, and our second factor is 5x plus 7. Okay, I think we have that, but I do want to go over where we just have a whole bunch of problems and they're not separated into each different case. So pause the video, and then when you come back, let's do these together. Okay, our first example. This is not a difference of 2 squares for obvious reasons. We do just have 2 terms, but we have the linear term, which is never going to be a perfect square because x is not a perfect square. This does have a GCF of x, so the 2 factors are x and x minus 8. In our second example, -3 is going to be our GCF. We have -3, and then we're left with x squared plus 2x minus, and I'm going to divide 3 into 105, and that gives me 35. Now I'm going to see if this can factor. This may not can factor. These may be the only factors, -3 and then this trinomial. So let's see. 1 times -35, and then I have 2. So -35, I could have 7 and -5. 7 and -5 adds to give me 2. So I have -3. I'm going to rewrite this trinomial into x squared plus 7x minus 5x minus 35. I'm going to group and group, and then I'm going to come up here where I have more room. I have -3 is my GCF. I'm going to factor out x, then I have x plus 7 minus, and then I have 5 and x plus 7. I end up with -3 times x minus 5 times x plus 7. Those are my 3 factors. Okay, number 3, my graphic organizer. I have -9, I have -8. I'm going to use 1 and -9. I'm going to rewrite this, x squared plus x minus 9x minus 9. I'm I'm going to group. This is a minus here. Don't let that get lost. So I have x minus 9 times x plus 1. This looks like a perfect square trinomial. So I would factor x squared. I take the sign of my linear term, and then I factor 4 into 2, and I have 2 of those. You could write it like that, or you can write it x minus 2 quantity squared. If you did not recognize this as a perfect square trinomial, you could do it by grouping. That will always work. Again, pause the video, and when we come back, we will do these together. Okay, number 5, this is a difference of 2 squares. So I'm going to have x and x, 4 and 4. One needs to be subtract and one needs to be add. Number 6, we're just going to simply do it by grouping. We already have our 4 terms. This is a cubic polynomial. I'm going to factor out a 2x squared. This gives us 4x minus 7 plus, I'm going to factor out a 7. This gives us 4x minus 7. And our 2 factors are 2x squared plus 7 and 4x minus 7. In number 7, I do have a GCF of negative 1. So I'm going to factor out a negative 1. And I'm left with x squared minus 12x plus 20. I'm going to use my graphic organizer. 1 times c. And my b term is negative 12. We're going to use negative 2 and negative 10 to rewrite negative 12x. So I have negative. Then I have x squared minus 2x minus 10x plus 20. I'm going to use some brackets here. And then I'm going to group the first 2 and the last 2. I have my negative GCF. I'm going to factor out an x here minus 10. And then I have x minus 2. So I'm going to come up here where I have more room. I have negative, my GCF. Then I have x minus 10. And then x minus 2. This is my answer for number 7. And our last one. There's no GCF because our A is 1. We have negative 54. And we have 3. So 6 and 9 multiplied gives us 54, but we need a positive 3, so I'm going to make the 6 negative. So I'm going to rewrite this using negative 6x, positive 9x, and then we're going to group, factor out a GCF, and then we're going to factor out a 9. And our 2 factors are x plus 9 and x minus 6.